I think Islam hates us.
They have done nothing except wreak havoc and terror for our faith and our religion.
When we stand up to those who oppress our communities, that Allah accepts from us that as a form of jihad.
Foundations of society are fragile. We must be the shepherds of our own civilization.
If anyone answers either yes or no without making necessary distinctions, both are not telling the truth. They're lying.
Father, we pray that your word will become a hammer that breaks rocks into pieces. That you will raise up in this nation pulpits and prophets that will call the nation back to repentance.
Will you distance yourself from those who think differently, or will you join us at the table and talk about what is really important? This is the Al-Ma'idah initiative, conversation without compromise.
Are you trying to fuse these communities, or are you just trying to, like, I don't know, convert people? Just, I'm sure, like...
So with the conversion piece, I remember getting asked this exact question by a woman from Jamal, actually.
Yeah.
and my answer to this question is always the same. As a Christian, I believe that God offers people eternal life, freedom from their sins, freedom from guilt, freedom from shame, eternal life, and an improved life now with all the tools you need to face life ahead of you. I mean, of course I want that for you.
Yeah.
If I believe that, how can I not want that for somebody?
Yeah.
The problem comes when we believe that it's in our power to change somebody's mind.
Yeah.
And so I don't believe I have the power to change somebody's mind. And actually, most Muslims believe the same thing.
Definitely,
they don't have the power to change the mind. So we always have this at the front of our events. It's like, hey, we'd like you to believe what we believe.
Yeah.
And you'd like us to believe what you believe. But all of us know this is bigger than us. If this is bigger than us, and we don't have the power to do that, then we can say what we honestly think, and we can let God do the rest.
Yeah.
And I want people from the Middle East to become Christians. I really do.
Yeah.
But there's other things I want too. I want peaceful nations. I want people to be able to raise their kids without fear of war. I want people to be welcome and feel safe in this country, in this city, in my neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And so while those things in my mind aren't the ultimate thing I want for people, I still want those things for people. And I want to build an environment where people are free to think about and talk about what they want.
Yeah, as a Muslim, we have the exact same thing. I mean, we're a bit more direct in our conversion attempt. I mean, but yeah, I mean, that's what I see religion as, and it's always like, especially with Christian missionaries. I mean, with Arabs, especially, that's going on, pivoting to our main topic, like in Arab states after the fall of empires, we've had like Christian missionaries from Europe, especially, all over the Arab world, and I mean, every third world country now had its fair share of these Christian missionaries, and they came in, they had the money, they had the funding, and they had the schools, the hospitals. I mean, my mother is Iraqi. Her kindergarten was in a missionary school. And there's always this theme, this among the Muslim community, this definitely the fear of conversion to Christianity or something like that. And it's interesting. I mean, when talking to you, like I feel more free to speak and express my opinions more, and like I think you notice that I'm very blatant when I talk about like conversion attempts and everything like that, because generally I like, for example, when I see Mormon conversion and I see a blonde person, just to me it's just a Christian, you know, and they creep me out. Like Mormon missionaries, like with their tags and everything, like they're very nice people. Like, talking to them, they're amazing people. But like to me, like when I see them approach, I'm like, oh, like they're gonna give me some of their wisdom or like civilize me or something, because that's the image that has been going on in Arab history all that time. You know, like we're gonna educate those people, we're gonna civilize them by giving them our religion, our form of spirituality. So yeah, like, and I know it's absurd. I mean, but
Well, there's a whole mixture of things. And the first thing I will say is by interacting with Middle Eastern culture, I've become much more civilized.
I think, yeah. Yeah.
Well, okay, let's just throw this out there. If you were the first AI being to be given a human body, and you ask, "Oh, what do I do when I go to the bathroom?" and one person says, "Okay,
Swipe,
like 100 tiny pieces of paper," and the other person, "No, this is just hose." Immediately.
Yeah. I mean, the logical things, yeah.
Yeah. So there's the thing with the LDS, the Mormons, is that they have a very different philosophy of conversion than biblical Christianity would.
Yeah.
Because they ultimately believe in free will so strongly to the extent that they really believe it's up to them to change everybody.
Yeah.
Change people.
Yeah.
If they just play their cards right, they'll say the right things, and it's somewhat manipulative as well, because
it's very close to Islam, the Islamic way, and their conversion. I really believe that they have their form of like jihad. I mean, they have their form of duty for almost everyone. It's part of the faith. I mean, no, it's very interesting when you compare Mormonism to like that three old faiths.
It is, and I think that one thing that's similar, and I Christians are not free of this by any means, but I think one thing they try and do, at least nowadays, is they're going to try their very best to avoid the difficult parts early on. They want to say, okay, community, family, it's great. Look how smiley everybody is. Look how perfect our lives are.
Yeah.
And you can go to heaven with all your family. Don't you want that?
Yeah.
And then, oh, by the way, you can become a god when you die if you.
If you do, yeah.
And so I was talking with a guy one time, and I've read all the Mormon source materials, and the guy, I said, oh, okay, well, he said, well, we believe the same thing. I said, we don't believe the same thing because the LDS Church teaches that God was once a man on another planet who became God by good works.
Yeah.
You can become God one day if you do enough good works. And he said, oh, we don't really focus on that. I said, okay, then, don't play that with me. Finish this quote. As God is now, man may become. as man is now, God once was. Okay, so you do know that. You've got that quote memorized, but it's just awkward. So I really try and be in a place where I want to be about education. I think this stuff is compelling by itself. I think if people look into the life of Jesus and look into the Bible, they will find something really, really compelling, and I don't need to sell it. I just want people to have access to that.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest things I want to focus on in what I do is getting rid of misrepresentations. And I think Muslims and Christians generally deal with each other in misrepresentations. And I'm actually more concerned about getting rid of Christian misrepresentation of Muslims than I am the other way around. Because that's kind of what I have more ability to affect.
Yeah, there's Hollywood, but there's not an Arab version or a Muslim version of Hollywood. But yeah, you're definitely right. I mean, we see bad Christians in Hollywood, but we also see good Christians in Hollywood. So, definitely, yeah.
Well, even with Hollywood, actually, I as a Christian always find the representations there terrible, and it's not because they're trying to be mean. It's because they don't know any nuances. That you'll have like a confessional booth in a Protestant church.
Yeah,
or something like
yeah.
That whenever I watch,
it's definitely more generalized.
Yeah. So I was watching a show called The Boys. On Amazon, and they had this church service, and I was just like, okay, pick a denomination. It doesn't make sense, and I think that's kind of what secular people do to religion generally, and that has happened to the Muslim world. That you get a very specific caricature of Salafism, and you think that is synonymous with Islam.
With Islam, yeah. I mean, other than Salafism, find me one movie where they depict an Arab character and they bring an actual Arab actor it's all. I mean, there are Arabs, but they can't speak Arabic. I mean, the language is kind of scary sometimes, but somehow they make it even scarier when they're auditioning. Like I can't even understand when a terrorist in a Hollywood movie would speak Arabic. I'm always interested in how they pronounce it, and it's always wrong. And it's like, that's pretty easy. It's a one email kind of thing. Check up, like ask your neighbor or something. Could you check out this sentence I'm printing out in this Hollywood set? And you'd see the Arabic language. You know when like they would print out Arabic and it's not connected. It's like all like American depiction of Arabic is just like disconnected. Yeah, and it's like it's a very easy fix on Microsoft. You know, it's like
it's not a very easy fix.
I mean, it's getting easier by the time. It's a very easy check on Google to know. I mean, you can see like the calligraphy. It's beautiful. And it's more connected. When you put it that way, it gets, I don't know, confusing. You know,
I had to spend such a long time getting Photoshop to work with.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, not all the setup goes well. But yeah, it's a hard language. But that's you doing individual work. This is sets. I mean,
yeah, right. I'm on this shoestring project.
Yeah,
and I can do it.
Yeah.
A multi-million-dollar production can.
So like, at least there was a chance to see. I mean, of course, like Hollywood eventually is targeting the American box office and the European box office. So of course, whatever depiction of Christians is gonna be okay. But like, just the generalized idea that Muslims. I mean, when you think about Muslims, you think about Saudi Arabia. You don't think Indonesia, where more majority of Muslims are Indonesia. More Muslims are Indonesia than Saudi Arabia and Iran together. You know, and it's like there's no depictions of Indonesian Muslims. You know, not even as terrorist Muslims. You know, which is like there are terrorist groups in Indonesia. You know, it's like at least depict us like we're Muslims are a diverse group. You know, it's like if you're gonna depict us badly, show the diversity. It's like, and it just amazes me on how much like here and like in the US, like they have no idea, they have not a single clue about the reality that we have in the Arab world and how much that area is connected to American politics and things like that. And you going to the topic, it's colonialism in a form of modern colonialism, showing this area as a backward area. It gets things easier, you know, when all you know about Saudi Arabia is terrorism and abductions. And I don't know if you've seen the Jamie Foxx movie, The Kingdom.
Yeah, I have seen that.
It's a very nice movie, and it depicts Saudi in a very almost accurate. Like the cops were the actual Saudi, but it was all like gunshots and killing and seeing the desert. And I mean, it was based on true things, but that's not Saudi. Like, that's not like. There's more to it, you know. Show the rest of it, you know, and it's.
Yes, and what I've been finding about Saudi is it's almost like it's at least feels like 3 different countries in a lot of ways.
Oh, more than that, way more than that. I mean, when you have the Western area, the Western region, I mean, you get the taste of the entire world in the area. And when it comes to food is the easiest expression of culture in Saudi because you don't need to physically show anything. So when it comes to food, in the Western region, there's all sorts of food from everywhere in the world. And that's a result of all the melting pot in Saudi.
Yeah, people with the Muslim world in general, people just assume it's a monolith. And I think Saudi can give that illusion more than some other places, but it really isn't.
Yeah, no, definitely not. Yeah.
So I went to lunch with a friend and their parents from Dammam in Seattle, and we're at a halal restaurant. and the dad is like, red wine, please.
Yeah.
And then the waiters like, really awkwardly look at each other and like, okay, we'll get it.
You got it. Yeah, I mean, humans. I mean, however much identity you try to force upon humans, they're gonna still be humans. I mean, there's a saying: all Saudis have two identities, and one's one where they're in Saudi, one where they're out. You know, and it's unfortunate. I mean, but thankfully, like, this religious identity is rolling back in Saudi, and I mean, there used to be Al-Hayya, the Islamic police, and all throughout my childhood I remember the fear of getting caught by a Hayya for doing any casual thing, for wearing shorts, and it was scary. But now it's no longer, they no longer have the abilities to arrest people. They just hang around malls, just trying to they're more closer to Mormon missionaries than actual like than actual police or something. They just creep people out and just like,
Hi, would you like to hit a
no, yeah, just yeah, thank you. But yeah, like in Saudi, you had to publicly, at least, you had to show that you're a Muslim. You have to pray when it's prayer time. You can't go to it. Of course, they still close in prayer time. But in the past, if the stores were closed and you were sitting outside, you could get arrested by the Islamic police, because you should be in the masjid now. You should be praying. So yeah,
and even that, it's even in Islamic civilization, you've got this kind of a cycle that it's not monolithic, because the Islamic Golden Age, the group that's in power is the Mu'tazilites. Am I saying that right?
What?
Am I saying that right? The Mu'tazilites.
Mu'tazilites?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
The guys who follow the school of Wasil ibn Atta. So they had this very rationalist school of Islam where
Al-Mu'tazila? Al-Mu'tazila. Al-Mu'tazila. Yeah. Al-Mu'tazila. Yeah. Khawarij. The Mu'tazila, they're considered, unfortunately, till now, an infidel group. Yeah, according to the Wahhabi books that were taught. So, yeah.
But it is the prevailing worldview of the Islamic Golden Age.
Yeah.
Right up until al-Mutawakil.
Yeah.
He's the one that arrested Ibn Han.
Yeah.
Then let him out of jail.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating.
Yeah, it is fascinating. I mean, Islam is not only a religion. I mean, it's a nationality, and like, it's again the melting pot. I mean, going into this is the fall of the Islamic Empire, the fall of the Ottoman Empire. Like, what is being a Syrian, or what's being Lebanese, or what's being Saudi, for example? What are these borders? They're not borders that were divided by Germanic tribes or whatever in Europe. They're basically borders that were drawn by like Europeans. But these people consider themselves Muslims first, then maybe Arabs. But it was their nationality that they were Muslims. Maybe Saudis till this day, they would consider their nationality as Muslims.
Right. So this is something that I've been really just sort of drinking from the fire hose in the last couple of years. That the map that we see today is really a recent innovation in a lot of ways. That we just assume now the world works in a nation-state system.
Yeah, when they asked Churchill about Transjordan, he said, "I made Transjordan with a stroke of a pen on a beautiful afternoon with biscuit and tea." That kind of arrogance was like present in the British and French Empire, and dividing the Arab nations. I mean, Sykes-Picot was basically just dividing a cake.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of straight lines. These straight lines don't happen normally. I mean,
have you ever read the 7 Pillars of Wisdom?
No, I haven't.
Are you familiar with T. Lawrence?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
He's a fascinating character because he's very conflicted. He knows what the British and French are doing is bad, and he knows he's lying to everyone about what they're going to give them, except he claims for Faisal. He says he's honest with him and is just trying to advise him on how to kind of come out with a winning hand. But the British basically make two sets of promises to different sets of people.
Well, two sets is an understatement.
Oh,
It was
yeah,
more
yeah.
than that, yeah.
At least that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yes, Lawrence of Arabia was, I mean, some people see him as a hero, but he was always that sort of person that seems, I mean, he may have been honest to Faisal, but where did that take Faisal? I mean, what did Faisal get in the end? Like, he didn't get much. Nobody got anything. I mean, yeah, so in the end, the English prevailed. So
yes. What I respected about him is that he was somebody who, although he didn't have the power to change anything, that he was somebody who was vocal about the problems that the British were doing, and I can respect that much.
yeah, I mean, definitely, yeah, he definitely was woke for a person in his position, but eventually the end result is what matters. That's what I always like bring up when we used to see Lawrence of Arabia, the mystification of this blue-eyed blonde guy wearing a shimar and a gal and hanging around with Arabs, and it's like, again, Hollywood depiction makes it even on another level of mystification and Orientalism in a way. And I feel like there's definitely more to Arabia than the Al Sharifs and those people. There were communities there.
Although even with that movie, there was a really interesting turn in it. That you have him at the beginning going into this society which he considers savage, and then at the end of the movie, he leads this charge to slaughter this retreating Turkish column, and then the Arabs are saying, "No, don't do this, and so even with the tropes that are in the movie, you do still have this sense of, no, we're not really the good guys.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's if you think too much about it, about how many person leaves a theater and thinks about if we were the good guys in Arabia or not. And I feel like if every British person was to think about what the British Empire had done to other civilizations, then there will be migraines all over the UK. I mean that would be.
Well, 2 years ago, I went on this. I went on this trip to Fiji, Australia, and New Zealand. That made me think a lot about the British Empire.
The sun never sets.
Yeah, the sun never sets. But the kind of conclusion I've come to is that it's not black and white. Now, I do not believe in empires at all, but with the British Empire, it's not. People oversimplify what's happening there. In that there are some people who are unscrupulous and want to steal people's stuff. There are some people who are well-meaning and completely incompetent, and there's other people who are well-meaning and somewhat competent. So with Australia, for example, what they did to the Aboriginal people was pretty appalling. In New Zealand, it was fairly well intentioned, but not very competent. So what happened in New Zealand is that the Maori actually asked to be part of the British Empire, and what happened to the Maori is the British always insisted on not having tribal lands but having private property. So, which I think that's good that people own their own stuff. But if that's not part of the culture, then people just realize they can sell their land and get stuff. And if they haven't adapted to the economy they're going into, they just burn through all their money.
Yeah.
So what that led to was Maori who were
owned the lands. Yeah.
Owned the lands and didn't have anything to do with it and were poor and have been poor to ever since. In Fiji, that was another instance where the Fijians asked to be part of the British Empire. And this guy said, okay, if you make me king, if I'm king of Fiji, then you can rule over us. And the British said, we're not touching that with the 10-foot pole. No, thank you.
Yeah.
They came back 10 years later. He said, okay, I'm the first among equals. And that's the deal.
Yeah.
And then, okay. And generally, Fiji there's still plenty of things that need to be fixed there. But generally, the British were pretty good to the natives, and now you have a native society that's got a strong culture, owns most of its land, and is generally doing okay as a country. Now, I don't believe in empires, but I think people idealize and demonize the past at the same time, and I think the British Empire gets a lot of flack because it was the last major empire before this one.
Definitely. Definitely it gets a lot of. But I mean, it was a loss, but it was one of the largest and like the most like centralized in the history of humanity.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, people have like they still remember the brutalities of the British Empire. Like, it's still in the memory. It's still very, very soon that the British were the masters of the land, you know. And I mean, it brings me to think about the big conflict, Israel and Palestine. I mean, we tend to forget that Palestine, the mandate of Palestine, was a thing. It gets forgotten that the British were kind of in charge of of the entire conflict, and they left it to be, you know. Like, there were mistakes. There were things that were definite mistakes, things that were clearly wrongdoings by the British, that the British government still supports to this day. I mean, creating Iraq was a mistake.
Yeah.
That country should not exist this way. It never was supposed to have this kind of nationality, all these nationalities under one melting pot that you just made to better governance. And like, I mean, if we think about all the conflict in the Arab world, the last conflict I can think of is the invasion of Iraq, Kuwait by Iraq. And you don't think that the British were made the preamble for that that's Saddam, but it did, because Kuwait was part of Iraq and then the British divided it. And I mean, it doesn't give justification for what Saddam did, but these kind of misgovernance, when the British came, they thought of themselves as the more educated, the more civilized. And they didn't ask what the people they were governing, whether they want to be in this country or that country. The borders were built over them, you know? And it's crazy. It's crazy when to think about something like that. I mean, you have people that would literally fight for a country that didn't exist 70 years, 80 years ago. It was just with a stroke of a pen, you know. And I don't know. It's a sense of. I feel like every Arab that when Arabs think about Sykes-Picot, like we can't imagine Syria being any other thing than the Syria we know of. Can't imagine Jordan not having this trans shape. I mean, as I told you before this, I love maps. I love seeing these like unique shapes. Got used to these shapes, and growing up to realize that Churchill drew it. Like it's humiliating. I feel it's something that really like it brings resentment. Sometimes I wonder why the Arabs never got on the cricket trade, because like I love the idea of cricket, of like beating the colonists in his own game. Like I'm sorry, but I'm always team India or Pakistan when it's against England, because I love this spirit of cricket where just like beating the colonists is just something that I don't know. It just amazing. I like that idea. You know?
Well, there's still soccer there.
Yeah. Well, you never know. Maybe in Qatar we can have something. Yeah. Yeah.
And that is really interesting. So a question I have, and I've had for a while, is how do Arabs generally feel about the Ottoman Empire itself?
That's a very important question, because I mean, Europeans, when they think about Arabs, I mean, there's one offensive word in the European comment, apparently offensive, but Turk. I was interested. Why was Turk an offensive word? Because Europeans generally called everybody from the Middle East a Turk.
Yeah.
And even Arabs, they called Turks. I'm not Turk. I'm an Arab, you know. And I thought about it, and I'm like, no, like all what Europeans know about the Middle East before World War I were people with their tarbush and their Turkish culture. I mean, even Arabs were highly influenced by the Turkish culture. So yes, it makes sense that people know Arabs as Turks. So yeah, I mean, they were considered themselves as Ottomans, but it was more of a continuation of the Islamic empire. I mean, the Sultan never denied being the caliph, but he kind of was, in a way, like the symbol of the caliph. And I mean, whether we liked it or not, the Ottoman Empire was an Islamic sultanate, and like definitely they used Islam as their nationality, the way of nationalism. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that Arabs consider themselves as Ottomans.
Because obviously, so obviously there is this sense of the caliphate in there, but also you do have plenty of rebellions against the Ottomans as well.
You have the tribalism. Tribalism definitely was always a nuisance for any empire. Like all the Arab tribes and the chaotic process of containing these tribes was always a nuisance to these empires. Up until the Ottoman Empire, I mean, you have the Saudis. The Saudis used to be rogue. Al Saud used to be just, according to the Ottomans, they used to be just a rogue rebellion that was crushed not once but twice. And then the third time, they came at a point where they couldn't resist, and then Saudi became what it is, the third kingdom. So yes, there's always rogue rebellions by Arabs because there were tribes, there were more units, more divided units to rebel, and they were often crushed all throughout Ottoman history. I mean, yes, people consider themselves Ottomans, but definitely you didn't have as, I mean, it was a very rural area. I mean, when I think about Palestine, for example, it was all rural area. I mean, it wasn't Palestine as the mandate of Palestine, but the area of Palestine. It was all just agricultural, rural area. They didn't have much time to think about, like, where we are in the Arab world. Should we call ourselves? I mean, there was the term Syria, but there was the term Palestine. It was coined by the Romans, but nobody really thought about it that much. It wasn't until like World War I when the elites thought about nationalism. They thought about, oh, like this is Syria and this is Palestine, or this is Syria, this is Iraq, and this is whatever. They considered Palestine as part of Syria in 1920. So yes, like there was a big question mark, big confusion on what are we? Should we bring back the Islamic Caliphate, or should we be like separate tribes and nations? And eventually, the Europeans made their decision based on them. So, yeah.
So let's say you have a time machine to 1916, and that you can outmaneuver the Sykes-Picot arrangement, and you can draw a map of the Middle East how you'd want to see it, what would you do?
Oh, that's a scary question. Definitely less borders. Like that's some of these things are just logical. It doesn't make sense. These borders don't make sense. A lot of them don't make sense. I mean, you have the borders of Oman and the UAE, for example, again left by the British, and you see it's hectic. It's just crazy, and you think about it, it's all just misgovernance. I feel like the perfect system for the Arab world is more of a federal, like a similar division, but less hard borders. Be the perfect, but definitely I have to change way more factors for an alternate history.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you can't now go and put the toothpaste back in the bottle.
Yeah, no, definitely. Once it's out, it's out. But yeah, less borders. I mean, there's definitely distinct cultures. I mean, you have that Maghreb Arabi. Maghreb Arabi is a very distinct culture than, for example, Egypt, even though they're very close. But they're just different. And you have people in the Gulf. They're very different than Yemeni people, even though they're essentially the same people. But of course, these are people that adopted their geographical areas, and that changes communities, that changes traditions. So yeah, I mean, I feel like in the age of nationalisms, we definitely see divided Arabia, but not that way, not this way. You know, like that doesn't make sense. You know, like yeah, these borders just sad. You know, it's just sad to think about these borders.
And what's one thing I found interesting is that really European interventionism has really continued to cause problems in the Middle East right up until Iran. The whole reason for the Iranian Revolution was partly because the British got rid of the democratically elected government, because the democratically elected government was not shelling out as much money to BP anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got these ridiculous oil rights that they're not willing to negotiate, and they get kicked out of the country.
Trade deals. Yeah, that's a new form of colonialism. Trade deals are, you can notice, you can go and check trade deals, you know. You can see what's disclosed and what's not disclosed. And what's disclosed is a scary amount of information of how it's imbalanced, a lot of these trade deals. So yes, it's the British were not well-intentioned. You know, they were not well-intentioned in any of their colonialist processes. If I may say. So like, I know what you meant going back to like having people that have well intentions and colonialism. But colonialism, I mean, we learned that now. There's no need to rendition. But colonialism is bad. It's always bad. We've learned that the more independence a country has, the more thriving a global community can occur. Colonialism is literally against that.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing that really, I think for me, it became, in the last few years, it's become a worldview issue, not just a pragmatics issue.
Yeah.
Because there's always somebody who's super pragmatic that can justify ruling somebody else for a while. But one thing that's really interesting in the Bible, when it talks about the kingdom of the Messiah, it talks about this kingdom that's in the kingdom of heaven. So it's not like an earthly Israeli empire or anything. It's Jesus sitting on his throne. And the book of Daniel, which is a prophecy about the Messiah, it says that the kingdom of God will break apart and shatter to pieces all the kingdoms of the earth, but that it will bless all of the nations of the earth. So the vision of the Old Testament, of the Tanakh, is not this Israel that rules over the whole world through military force is actually of distinct nations. So when it talks about the Messiah in the Psalms, about 1,000 years before Jesus, so 3,000 years ago now, it talks about the reign of the Messiah to come, and it talks about the kings of Sheba and Seba bringing gifts in peace. It talks about Assyria and Egypt living peacefully with Israel. It talks about all this world that's living harmoniously together in these independent nations, not as part of some great empire. So it's essentially one of the Bible principles is you don't steal.
Yeah.
And going out annexing people's lands, even if you think you're helping people, is essentially theft in some extent. And God has designed people to be self-governing, to be free from an imperial city, to be free from overbearing rulers.
Definitely, yeah. No, definitely these religions, when you see their message, they definitely give this idea of breaking chains. When Islam came, وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا تَتَعَارَفُوا. Yeah, they talk about the diversity of humanity and to communicate, to be connected. There is this sense of diversity, this beautiful sense of diversity, but when it comes to application, that's where I'm more educated than this other ethnicity. I'm gonna civilize, again, to the keyword of this podcast. I'm gonna civilize them. And yeah, I mean, the Europeans civilized the hell out of Arabs. I mean, we got, I mean, literally, like, the mandates were made. I mean, and like, colonization isn't completely secular. I mean, there is this Christian theme to it. I mean, I say as a joke, but there was this idea of, I mean, Lebanon was made to keep Arab Christians in a certain nationality. They still want, like, these politicians, as much as they were secular at the time, they still had this idea that they wanted to convert people. You know? Definitely.
It's what I think one of the most dangerous things to do is when people have a liberal application of religion, they can easily fuse that with other things. So I was researching the history of slavery the other day because I knew, this is actually really weird, because I was researching it and I read about this guy. The first British person to take slaves across the Atlantic from Africa was a guy called Captain John Hawkins. So I read about him Friday. Lunch the next day, I was at a church barbecue and I meet this guy with the same last name. I'm like, oh, you like the pirate? He's like, oh, how'd you know that? That's actually my great
God.
So I could not have had that conversation 24 hours earlier. But so I was really curious what Europeans were using to justify slavery. And actually what they're appealing to is Plato. Plato has this idea of natural slavery, that some people may just better function as free, and then some people better function as. So it's really this ancient Greek idea that European culture has never really shaken from it, because Alexander the Great is this model for every European madman who's ever wanted to take over the world. This idea that the Western man goes into the East and then gets rid of the tyrannical despot and brings order through philosophy.
For philosophy, yeah. I mean, I'm not sure if I'm getting the story right, but there is a story I remember someone telling me. It might be wrong, it might be completely wrong. I'm sorry if it's wrong. Like an Old Testament story of the three sons, Sam, Ham, and Yam. I know in Arabic, Shem and Ham and Japheth, and the father of
Canaan.
Yam, the father of Africans, on how they, like, the origin of how Africans, the justification of the African slavery by European Christians, that happened because Noah got drunk and did not cover himself, and his son passed by him and didn't cover him, and he was condemned to be a servant for the other two kids, the other two sons.
So the story is you're almost dead on, but you're right about Noah being drunk and naked.
Yeah.
And then Ham sees this, and then he goes and gets his other brothers to look.
Oh, yeah.
So he goes, "Oh, come look at this, guys." But then Shem and Japheth walk backwards and cover him with a cloth.
Yeah.
And then Noah says, "Cursed be Canaan." It doesn't say cursed be Ham.
Canaan,
who was one of Ham's sons, who didn't live in Africa. He lived in what is now Israel, Palestine.
Canaan, so the father of Arabs, basically. So
no, not that either, because Abraham would be seen as the father of Arabs.
Yeah.
So this would be an ethnic group which is now extinct.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Except maybe the Lebanese.
They got what I know about the Canaanians is that they got integrated to the Abrahamic lineage, but the Arabs are very much, there's a lot of Canaan ethnicity in there, in Arabs, which
it's fascinating.
Yeah, it is fascinating.
Yes, there are people who use the curse of Canaan as a justification for slavery, but it's very conspiratorial.
Yeah.
So it's not like a direct application of the text. It's this thing connects to this thing. And
yeah.
It's the same thing the Nazis did with the New Testament.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Jesus wasn't really Jewish. He was annexed by the Jews annexed this Aryan village from earlier.
My fault. Yeah.
And whereas whatever the Bible does say about slavery, one thing it does say is that anybody caught stealing a man and selling him into slavery shall die, and anyone caught with that person shall die as well. So if you want to justify the kind of slavery that happened in the Middle Passage, you have to make something else up. You have to find some other. You have to use some other. You have to blend some other justification in with it, and otherwise you just can't get there.
Yeah.
And one thing that I found that's really fascinating is that in the British Empire, they actually banned missionary activity in lots of parts of the British Empire.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Because the East India Trading Company didn't want do-gooder missionaries messing up trade.
Yeah. Secular eventually wins, trumps the religious efforts. Yeah.
Well, although it didn't, because the British Empire did see a religious revival, which is part of what led to the abolition of slavery. But in India, for example, that's what got the practice of sati banned. So sati is this practice in some subsect of Hinduism, where if a man dies, you burn his living wife with him on the pyre.
Yeah.
And obviously that's awful. And
that's when they banned it. Yeah.
But so it's kind of a mess in my head, because were I the governor of British India, I'd probably ban that too. But I also think we shouldn't be there.
Yeah, it shouldn't be there in the first place. Yeah, which it's a huge question. I mean, especially nowadays, this question where should I bring my opinion on this country or should I just keep it to myself? You know, it's like, but now it's a different version. I mean, when you're just bringing your opinion and not changing laws. But yeah, I mean, when you're doing right by your God-given, when it's God-given, it's different. You know, that's what I always say. When it's God-given, it feels different. It's a different duty, and I feel like a lot of that colonialism came with that theme. And again, when I was talking about how like this kind of like Christian preaching in general creeps me out. that's the reason, maybe. Yeah, I mean, colonialism. I feel like a lot of Arabs have some sort of inherited PTSD from colonialism, I feel. And it shaped us. It made us what we are. I mean, it made us. All that memory shaped these nations nowadays, and even these fears. So yeah, like, well, when I was talking to you at first, like, what's your end goal here? My point is that I feel like we reached a point now where I feel it doesn't matter that you're Muslim, you're Christian, you're Jewish. If you're Buddhist, if you're a practicing religious person, we're becoming a minority. We're not among the majority anymore. Definitely not in public. And I feel like when you do interfaith initiatives, it's all about like communication, talking. But I feel like in places like America, we should be more actually active. Like together, like Muslims, Christians, and Jews. I mean, like you see initiatives, for example, in the UAE, where like they built a synagogue, a mosque, and a church next to each other, and it's all these political movements of like uniting the three people of the book religions, and it makes sense. I mean, here in America, when there's a minority, it makes sense to fuse rather than convert. It doesn't make sense for me to convert anyone.
I think the thing, and the way I would see it is that because we've got these colonial histories attached to these things, that it's actually a huge barrier for us talking about the ideas. Because and this goes on within the Middle East as well. So my experience is Arab Christians, the suspicion you would automatically feel towards me as a Western Christian.
Yeah.
Arab Christians feel towards Arab Muslims.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
There's this huge standoffishness.
Yeah, of course. And that causes a lot of issues. I mean, you see Egypt, where like Egyptian Christians are very hostile, or like, I mean, it's two-way street, but you see the hostility where you'd expect more passiveness, but there's this built-up hostility in these Arab Christians because they also, there's also this. So my point is, this old style, this old school converting, I mean, is no longer, doesn't work anymore. There's this fear, there's this worrying. I mean, like, people worry about, like, because as I told you, like, Islam is not a religion, it's more of a nationality, it's more of an identity, cultural identity. It's like a package, it's a big package, and like converting, leaving Islam is leaving this entire package, and it's something that I don't feel like people are interested in converting anymore. I'm very amused when I hear someone converted from Islam to Christianity or Christianity to Islam. Maybe Mormonism is a new thing, but or the Church of Scientology, maybe that's a new hip thing. But like, there should be more interfaith, and this is exactly brings back to like the Arab position. I mean, we should, like, Palestine. I always talk about Palestine. I always think about Palestine and that matter, because in Palestine you see the division. You see, because it's where all the religions agree upon the sacred land. I mean, so like you see Arab Palestinians, you see Christians and Muslims being kind of on the same side, like for the first time, and like all through, like, the conflict was always between a Muslim Christian conflict. It was never like, well, it was, but the majority of the conflict was Muslim and Christian. It no longer is, because they're the minority now. They fused together. They created some sort of, and Palestine is different than all other countries because they didn't have this common threat to their identities. Zionism was a threat to their identities. It was like it changed everything. So like I feel like Palestine is a very good example, and so it's a very good place to think about their cultural identity and where religions really play a big role, because you think about Zionism as a Judaism, like a religion, a movement that is like for the Jews, but you don't think of Palestine as, or some people think of Palestine as a movement for the Muslims, but it's not. It really is not. It's more of a cultural movement, Palestine, and it fused both Christian and Muslim identities, and Jewish, for that matter, but not as highlighted as Muslim and Christian. But I feel like Palestine is that nationality, and it's every Arab nationalism has Palestinian nationalism, and it's some sort of way, because in a way it is still the real Arab struggle for existence till this day.
It's almost it's almost like this huge humiliation of the identity in a lot of ways.
Definitely.
Because it's like it's if you want to go and present yourself, it's like this huge spot you can't get rid of. If any Israelis listening, that's obviously a metaphor. It's not what I think is Israel.
Yeah.
But I'm saying how it's perceived. It's this thing that people, that to the Muslim world or the Arab, especially the Arab world, it's this long mark of humiliation that hasn't been able to be dealt with.
Yeah. I mean, and like a lot of people don't think about that, like Zionism and Saudi Arabia very much, but for example, my father worked for the oil company in Saudi, Aramco, and we had a gas line that went through northern Saudi, and it's called the TAP line. Actually created 6 cities in Saudi that were just made for this gas pipeline. And all throughout my childhood, it was off. It was never worked. There's an entire pipeline that should pump gas from the Gulf, the Arabian Gulf, till the Mediterranean, that is off. Because I learned now that pipeline used to stop by Haifa, and when they built it in 1944, I think, and when the Nakba happened, they lost the port of Haifa, and then they moved it to Lebanese port, and then when the Israelis took over the Golan Heights, it took over a big portion of that. So it really goes towards even our resources, even as a Saudi, as a Saudi, we once had the opportunity to pump gas to the Mediterranean directly, but we couldn't anymore because of this settler colonialism, that country that decided to settle in that area. I mean, like it's easy put. It was a settler colonialist country that came in, and it had its roots there, but it still is a settler colonialist country. So yeah, it's a humiliation, and it still is a humiliation. And I mean, now we're getting more friendly, which is good. I mean, the whole rejecting communication was definitely bad, but I feel like we're still humiliated by that, and I feel like that perspective, I feel like people don't think enough about the humiliation that is caused by Zionism in general.
And that's really the same thing that's happening in Kashmir as well right now, that you've got this historically Muslim area that, while I think there's political reasons behind it, it's there to be a humiliation of the Muslims in India by the ruling Hindu party.
Yeah.
It's largely symbolic.
Yeah. No, it's not a Muslim thing. It's not a Hamas thing. Definitely, like a lot of people try to associate Palestine with Islam. It really isn't. Thinking about like all the diehard Palestinians that I think of are all atheists. They're not religious. I feel like the more non-religious, non-Muslim they are, the more Palestinian identity they get. It's a void that can be filled. So yeah, when I speak to Israelis, they always associate Palestine, Hamas, with Gaza, with terrorism, and it really isn't. It's like Palestinian nationalism was a very elitist, very educated nationalist movement that was elitist. Unfortunately, it wasn't a grassroots movement, and that caused the whole Husseini and the Nazi association and all that with Palestine as a nationalism, and that's what it's always brought up as as Arabs being anti-Semitic, even though Arabs are Semitic. But this is how it goes.
And I think you've got to get to a point with all of this where you have to figure out what's actually the way forward. Because one thing that struck me about going to Palestine is that, and this is generally something that strikes me about the Arab world, that the image we're presented is this fervently religious community which has very specific, well thought out goals, which is not the case. Those people obviously exist, but that's not the case most of the time. And most people from Arab cultures are very easygoing and friendly and just want to be left alone for the most part. And it seems that too much of what happens is we let the ideologues of what the world should have been speak, instead of actually thinking, okay, well, now what? What do we actually do at this point? How do we actually go from here?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely, there's this. Confusion. It's very confusing what to do in these situations. But I always think about this. Imagine, I just read Albert Camus. Imagine if the French stayed in Algeria and Algeria was still controlled by the French, and there were still French people living. Generations of Frenchmen were born and raised in Algeria. And I would think about it, like, what would it be? Would it be close to like the European and Native American relationship? Would it be an Israel-Palestine kind of situation? Would have we had a different Algeria, or like that makes me think about the situation in Israel and Palestine. What could have happened? All the alternate history to what have happened. Imagine living in Seattle when the natives aren't completely wiped out. Disease helped Europeans here. It didn't help them that much in Asia. But it's these things. Now we're thinking that we're now thinking about our similarities more than our differences. In the past, there was, I'm a Christian and you're a Muslim. You're a Muslim, I'm a Christian. I'm British, you're Italian. I'm Italian, you're British. We're moving these labels. They're no longer they're very primitive. They box in personalities, and you can align boxes. But now, more and more, we're getting unique shapes, different shapes, more 3D things. If you think about it in that way, these things are harder to align, and I feel like these labels are no longer shouldn't be a point of discussion. We shouldn't discuss Judaism and Islam and Christianity when talking about Israel and Palestine. It's a valid thing. It's a valid point to talk about religion. but it's people living their lives. James Galvin he's a professor at UCLA. When he talks about Israel and Palestine, he talks about it. It's a real estate problem. It's not a Jerusalem or whatever problem. It's basically the most wanted real estate in history.
Well, that's true, but the worldview does still play into that. Because, for example, the idea of a nation state is really a European imposition on the Middle East.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, people like Palestinians don't want to live as Palestinians, or Israelis don't want to live as Israelis. They want to live, and that's something that we have to acknowledge. And there's not a uniqueness to the way they live. It's just the same thing. And like, there's no difference between whether you're a Muslim or a Christian when it comes to your daily life. It's the same thing. we no longer have major differences in our culture, and like we had in the past.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's true. But it's going to again depend on who you're talking to. So, so for example, there's two people from different worldviews. We could both want our children to be educated, so we could help fund a school together. We might want the holes on the freeway fixed, and you don't drive.
Yeah.
we both want the light rail to be finished.
Yeah.
These are things we can work together on. But there are some worldview questions that come up when we think, okay, what do we build together? And this is what you see with the Sunni-Shia divide as well. That for Sunnis and Shias living in America, or say Oman, where they're not the main faction, their worldview differences don't really come into play because they don't have a chance to build a Shia nation or a Sunni nation, and the differences of what that vision entails. But there do come some questions that we have to think through down the line. So let's talk taking Israel and Palestine. If the goal is to rebuild the caliphate, which I don't think is many people's goals in this day and age, but let's take that as an extreme example.
Yeah.
And the other goal is to build a nation of Israel. Those are two fundamentally opposing ideas.
Yeah.
Now, whereas if you have people who are Arab nationalists, there's ways that those things can actually fit together and both exist. So your vision of the world, which is ultimately determined by your worldview, does affect things, especially if it drives you to not want to be pragmatic.
Yeah.
If there's something that would benefit a lot of people's lives, but giving up a certain amount of territory would be this symbolic loss, and you screw the lives because of the symbolism.
Yeah.
That's where that's where some of the clash begins.
Yeah, definitely. No, I mean, you never know. One day we might all be battling Confucianism and the entire spiritual questioning. But yeah, like, I don't know. It's just frustrating. Like this religious conflict when it comes to Israel and Palestine. Just going on a tangent, but not really staying on it. I'm very curious about, here in America, the Christian support for Israel. Like, that's something that is very intriguing to me. Like the second coming of Jesus, and like this very tinfoily kind of way of thinking, where it's like, Jesus won't come until Israel is like controls Judea and Samaria and all that, and like putting that in the narrative to support Zionism, basically Christian Zionism, basically like the entire narrative of that always like amazes me. I mean,
how does a whole crowd of right-wing fundamentalist Christians end up being the biggest supporters of a secular, mostly atheistic state with socialistic roots?
And a lot of those people would be anti-Semitic. I mean, like blatantly anti-Semitic, but would support like, and I don't know, it's it's just a very interesting relationship between like these two extremities in religion.
I think the anti-Semitic thing and the pro-Israel thing, I don't think those things generally align. I think that's a bit of a media caricature.
I mean, when you think of again, correct me if I'm wrong, Armageddon, when it happens, 2/3 of the nation of like I heard some guy blabbing on YouTube. I forgot was the Book of Zechariah.
Zechariah 14.
Yeah, and like the how like 2/3 will be annihilated as like directly, and then 1/3 would communicate would see the fire and would choose, I think, to follow Jesus or not, and like that entire like prophecy, and like I saw the guy like talking about it in the hill, like the hill of Gideon, like the video of it. I remember when I was taking the class, and it just like astonished me because he was basically talking about like a Holocaust, and like he was justifying Zionism in a way that implied that he was anti-Jewish in a way. like which is scary. It's scary how we can how humans can even think that way, supporting someone till their eventual, I don't know.
All the wackiness is in there.
Yeah,
I very much doubt that it's driven by Jewish prejudice. I think it's just a really, really, really big desire for Jesus to come back.
Yeah, definitely.
Isn't quite thinking through the collateral damage. But I think a lot of the, not all of it, but a lot of the predictions in the Bible that people use to talk about the end of the world, especially from Jesus, are actually talking about the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. And people, I think, misapply that. But here's what I think is going on, and I can speak to this pretty authoritatively because I grew up very, very uncritically pro-Israel.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not anti-Israel. I think, but I think you've got to see how miraculous people see this as being.
Definitely, no, 100%.
That it's kind of mind blowing. And so the story of the Bible is the story of Israel as a nation. And this isn't the first time. It's scattered throughout a bunch of nations and then comes back to its historic homeland. It happens after the fall of the Babylonian Empire as well. So even now, I as a Christian, I see that and I think there's some purpose behind this. The problem comes when we act like we're prophets, that we know the exact purpose. Yeah. And the other problem is that we don't have a nuanced view of it either. So what some people do is they think, okay, because Israel are God's historic chosen people, anything that they do is justified. But that was never the view of Israel in the Bible. One example of this. That when Israel is coming into the land initially, they're told to wipe out all the Canaanite tribes.
Yeah.
And I can explain that more another time, but I don't want to hide from that.
Yeah.
But one tribe, the Gibeonites, they say, okay, we're going to pretend like we're from a long way away and act like we want to join them, and then we'll be safe. And they do. The Israelites buy the deception, and they make a treaty with them that they can live in the land. And then it's found out that they're doing it under false premises, but God insists they honor their word to treat them well. Then King Saul, it says, in his zeal for the people of Israel, this is about 600 years later, maybe 500, it says that he persecuted and killed some of the Gibeonites. And King David, the king who comes after Saul, is told by God that he has to go and right this injustice of Saul breaking the land's treaty with the Gibeonites.
Yeah.
So while I can believe Israel has a right to exist, and I can believe that it has a place in God's plan, even under the most extreme circumstances where they're all believe Jesus is the Messiah and agree with everything I believe in, that still doesn't justify everything you do. And so I believe in the way that when we talk about a lot of Christians in America being a friend of Israel, it's like a high school guy with a crush on a girl who he doesn't know anything about. And so he's obsessed with her and he never talks to her. Doesn't have any idea what she's about.
Yeah.
So they could have a great relationship if he actually take the time to know her properly. But he just idolizes her. And
or he could just hate her if he got to know her for real. I mean,
yeah.
He got to know her personality. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's a fake pretense of a relationship. Yeah. So I believe in being a friend of it. I call myself a friend of Israel, but in a real friendship way. And in my friends, if they're doing something that's not good for them or it is not right, I confront my friends about that.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, definitely friendship, like we take friendship in a wrong way when we say, I'm a friend of Israel. I'm like, it's not, being a friend of Israel doesn't mean that you have to be blindly behind everything, every decision that comes out of Israel. And I mean, it's astonishing. Like, it's astonishing of that sort of relationship. And like, as you said, like, they barely know anything about that land. I mean, and they would just completely support blatantly anything that comes out of Israel. I mean, any decision.
And then it's the exact opposite with Saudi Arabia. While the government of America is pretty much as much a friend of Saudi Arabia as it is Israel, but people generally see Saudi Arabia as a U.S. enemy.
Yeah.
And in reality, they're both countries that have great things about them and not so great things about them, and being
very similar, both very much similar in their current position, their current modern position in their international stage. Definitely, you see a lot of similarities between Saudi and Israel. Kind of in a terrible way, unfortunately. It's not in a good way similar. Yeah, and that also goes back deep into, I mean, Jews weren't considered like people that Europeans would like. There is this Orientalism and Israelis. I mean, you see Israelis talking about, like, they would sing in Eurovisions, and they would try and participate in the Champions League, because they want to be more European, or they want to seem more European, that we're different than those Orientals. We're still Orientals, you know. But you think about how Europeans saw Jews back then. They were the Orientals. Some of those evangelicals see Israelis as Orientals still, and like this whole non-white. Also, it's sad how humans always are shallow enough to end up their discussions about the color of their skin. Like it goes to that point. I mean, yes, Israel might have a religious background to its existence, but you also see the racism and that country, and you see how it almost goes by unnoticed. You see the biggest soccer team they have is a very racist team. And you think about it, I mean, like, these are not separate things where they have these these cultural racisms and trying to be more white. And
I remember a campaign when I was younger in England. There was "Let's kick racism out of football." I remember coming up with the opposite caption of "kicking football out of racism."
Oh my God! Yeah, exactly. I mean, football is where you get the most racist juices out of a community.
Soccer has a way of football. Soccer football has has this way of bringing out the worst.
Yeah.
Because I think it's what Europeans replaced war with.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, but Byron just did the blitzkrieg on North London in that case. Yeah.
Well, I think it's becoming that might do the trick for the Middle East, because I remember about 10 years ago I was driving from London on a Sunday night with my dad, and we were driving at Edgware Road, which is the way out of North London, and there were Arabs everywhere waving flags, marching in the street, and we thought, oh wow, what the heck has happened? What awful thing has happened now? What's going on? And we get home, we look it up, because the phone internet was not that good back then. Yeah. And Iraq had won the Arab Cup.
The Arab Cup, yeah. I mean, we take football very seriously, and I mean, politicians know that sports could very much, they could replace this violence. I mean, Saudi invested a lot of money into Basra to build soccer fields and football fields and everything, but they do there is this. We should learn from the Europeans and change our weapons into footballs maybe, but fortunately, yes, this is the world we live in.
There's this adage all the time people would say when I was younger, that two countries of the McDonald's have never gone to war with each other. And people would always see that so cynically. Wait, I feel like we're not giving McDonald's enough credit.
Yeah.
Is that really the solution?
Yeah, is that really the solution? McDonald's,
Happy Meals?
Happy Meals, yeah, no, the Americanization of it all, yeah. I mean...
And so... That's the other side to empire as well, is that there's sometimes a military element to empire, but there's also a cultural element to it as well. And in the world, and it's very difficult to. So take America and China right now. There's lots of people that want into what America has going on for a lot of reasons, and it's because American culture has been very powerful in a lot of ways, and it's the empire is mostly spread through culture, plus with some shady military adventures for sure. But then take China as the converse of that. They're in a place where they're very powerful. They've got a lot of money and they've got a lot of military power on the rise. But no one really wants to be a part of China right now. People are trying very hard not to become
Chinese. Well, you would be surprised. I mean, for Saudi, for example, they just implemented Mandarin in schools. So you would be surprised on how much that I don't think people will be more Chinese. They'll be more. They will turn into. I feel like we're gonna have more of an Asian culture that is gonna replace the Americanization of the world. I mean, now you have this fascination with Korean culture in Saudi, and I really feel like not a single culture is gonna replace the Americanization in general, because people are definitely becoming less and less American and more anything else. But yeah, no, I think people still have the tendency to want to be more Chinese. I feel like, again, Confucianism is going to be the biggest competitor with religions, maybe.
Maybe. I think by the time China takes over the world, it would be Christian. The rate is growing.
Yeah. Well, you never know. I mean, I really don't think that religion is gonna. I feel like the new religion is gonna be AI and everything else is gonna be.
Those are fascinating. Worshipping AI gods. There's literally a guy right now who's trying to say, okay, I'm just gonna write a bunch of pro AI stuff now, so when the robot uprising,
to take me in their good. Yeah.
China's monitoring system's even called Skynet, which is ridiculous.
Which is scary, yeah.
You got the wrong side.
You got the wrong side of it, yeah. You don't watch enough movies.
So I think that's one of the wonderful things about the world we live in right now, is that access to other cultures is closer and easier than it's ever been. And I think the UAE in a lot of ways has put a dent in some of the images of Arabs in the world.
A very good dent. The UAE presented like Arabs in a very nice way. I feel like UAE and Qatar too. Like definitely not very well to talk about Qatar in public, but I mean these countries, like the Gulf countries, brought a better image to like the Arab culture. They presented Saudi, unfortunately, the conservatism just pulled back the country big time. But the UAE definitely, like even the new movements that is going on, the UAE is definitely leading the new image of Saudi in a way.
And there are so many historic contributions that have been made. So there's algebra, which people should stop telling people about that. Like,
Yeah.
No one likes algebra.
Yeah. We shouldn't be associated with algebra.
But you gotta play more into the ice cream and coffee.
Yeah. Coffee definitely is our thing. Yeah.
And actually guitars.
Yeah.
Even though that's technically haram.
Yeah. The oud is definitely. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these cultures basically were killed off by these resurrections of Islamic, or what they call Islamic. But yeah, like I mean, our theater is almost non-existent because of the Islamic stranglement of theater. Poetry, I mean, as much as Arabic is a very thriving poetic language, but the Islamic culture basically took over. Instead of reading poems, you read Islamic recitations, and you do it in a more melodic way and more musical way to like get the same feeling, and then that's where you go into all sorts of things, and Islam definitely changed, like took over, and like I mean, in theater you're not allowed to like, unlike Christianity or Europe where theater thrived, because it was the only way to like show biblical stories in Latin or in Greek Latin, while in Islam it was not allowed to depict the prophet or the companions, and you can't have stories without the companions or
right. Did you watch the like 32-part series about Caliph Omar? Yeah,
I saw some of the episodes.
That was news.
That was a big controversy. I mean, that was a huge controversial show. It wasn't an easy show to be put on. I mean, that was the first real depiction of the companions in a way, which was a big no-no in Wahhabi Salafi Islam.
Right. So they obviously didn't show Muhammad or any of his wives.
Oh yeah, that would be a big no-nos.
the caliphs they showed.
Yeah.
But even then, it's I love being able to see that. But one thing that makes me sad is that Aisha, I really think, is one of the most interesting women in human history, hands down.
Yeah.
Just this fascinating character. And so that you can't show her on screen means there's so much that you can't.
Yeah, the daughters of Abu Bakr, Asma and Aisha were both very like strong names in these storylines. I mean, they had Aisha had a whole war that was fought around her, which is, I mean, it's very controversial. Like not very much people share your pleasant impressions of Aisha. Like Shias that literally are divided about Aisha. So yeah, it would have been nicer to have those depictions. I mean, it would be nice to have an image to it, but I don't know. Maybe it gave them a more mystified identity, I feel.
I think that is it, actually, and I think that mystifying the past, I think, really hurts us.
Yeah,
because it prevents us from really learning from it
or thinking about it like logically. I mean, I feel like if we really go back on our history and like think about these things, think about these decisions and like these matters that led to this and like actually put a name to or an image to what we were told about. Like we could consider like where, like when we talk about religion, we don't talk about again. I think we were talking about like when did this occur? When did this message was established? Like the setting. We have to think about these things when we think about Islam as an Arab religion. I mean, it's a diverse religion, but it also came in Arabia, and it's very much Arab, as much as I'd hate to admit it, but it is.
Yeah, it's inevitable.
It's inevitable.
If you're going to say the word of God is only the word of God when it's recited out loud in Arabic.
Yeah,
it's inevitable.
And when you think about all these controversial things and that we think are controversial now, they weren't very controversial back then. That doesn't mean we should just surrender to the idea of it. We should think about where these commandments happened, where these commandments occurred. I mean, slavery wasn't abolished completely in Islam, but it was. You were as Christianity, you weren't allowed to obtain new slaves, but you were allowed to trade because there were already slaves there. I mean, there were pioneers in African slavery. Unfortunately, that's the unfortunate part of our history. But yeah, like these were cultural reformations. Religions were basically cultural reformations, as I see them now, and we should see them as that and that.
That's a great place to start sort of landing this, because obviously there's a lot of wounds in the past.
Definitely.
The way the Middle East has been cut up, the way that empires have left a stream of bodies, and almost all of our cultures at some point have both perpetrated evils and been the victims of evil as well. Because I mean, the reason you have all these Arab-speaking countries right now is not simply because it was a convenient language to speak.
Yeah,
there's some imperialism in the history there as well.
There's implicit imperialism, definitely. Yeah.
But nevertheless, here we are. We have an opportunity to do something with the world, and if you had an opportunity to talk to the average Arab, whatever nation they might belong to, what kind of citizen would you hope they be? What would you want them to strive for?
Definitely, I would want a more individualism is something that lacks in the Arab world, especially Saudi. To think about Saudi, but individualism is something that is something that we lack, kind of. An average Arab would probably be Muslim, as the majority of Arabs are Muslim. So my message would be to take Islam as a message, as again cultural reform. Not, it's a religion. It's a tool. It's not something to control you. It's not. I have this problem with religion, especially in the Middle East, where politicians use religion to their own faith. It's a tool for politicians, but it's not really that. It's a tool for the person, the individual. I feel like we should individualize ourselves, and in religion especially. And I feel like we should have more individualism in Islam, as is modern Christianity, or modern Christians are individual. I really think that something similar, like a shared tongue and a shared identity, a shared background that between all Arabs should be emphasized in this new message, this new citizenship of some sort. But yeah, no, I can't think. I really can't imagine. I mean, I can't imagine, again, going back to the beginning, what's Syrian but that country, other than that, you're not Syrian. But what's Syria? You know.
What's actually what you're talking about is really interesting, because that's something I've studied pretty extensively. It is that where that individualism kind of went in Islam.
Yeah.
Because really, if you think about it, Muhammad is kind of the ultimate individual.
Definitely.
In some ways, because he comes to a polytheistic society and he's literally the only public one saying what he's saying. Yeah, then through the sort of modern system people are in, though, that's basically grown up over time, is it goes from individual responsibility to don't ask too many questions, just trust the leaders, trust the scholars. The scholars are the inheritors of the prophets. Whoever diverges from the Muslim community diverges to hell.
Yeah.
My community will never agree upon an error.
Yeah.
All these things that want to single you out for
not being part of the flock, not being
and there's an Islamic antidote to that. That's for other people to dig for. But biblically, there's this really interesting thing in the book of Exodus where it says, "You shall not fall in with the many in order to do evil." And we'd all believe that. But it's the emphasis. It's this expectation that your community can go very, very wrong. And you are accountable to your creator to be able to stand up to evil when you see it, no matter the cost to yourself. And that's a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And I think the development of literacy is actually a really important part of that, because that's a big thing that happened in the Reformation. And one thing I've noticed in the Arab world is that there's a disconnect between a lot of people and literacy and Fusha. And that's exactly what Europe was like before the Reformation.
Yeah.
That you had Latin, then you had High German, and then you had Common Spoken German.
Yeah.
And then in England you'd have, again, same thing, Latin, High English, Common Spoken English. And what the Reformers did is they printed the Bible in the tongues of the common people, not in the high dialect. And that basically turned the language into a language that everybody could have access to.
Yeah.
And I think whatever route Arabic has to take, I think art, literature, movies, things that capture people's imaginations need to be made in Arabic.
Definitely, yeah. No, I mean, again, that takes back to the colonization. Everyone wanted to be more European, and nobody thought about their own language. And naturally, it was lost. But yeah, I agree with you. Like, it's important. And again, when you talk about these Bibles that were written in Arabic and different dialects, like these things. I mean, these institutionalized religions are also thinking about, like, Christianity thought about that matter. Islam, it's not very addressed. I mean, you have one tongue, Quraysh, and that's it. So definitely, there's definitely this difference when it comes to reading this book every day. So yeah, no.
And my hope is that people who speak Arabic will celebrate their language. That even though it's difficult, that people would make an effort to actually learn that, to know it well, and to drive the language forward, not to just go to something else because it's easier.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, and going to what I would say to the average Arab, your language, like, that's definitely the biggest thing to an identity, to have your language. And
so here's a question I'm curious to hear what you think of. So I know people who are Christians and from Gulf countries.
Yeah.
They're not. What would you say to somebody who's become convinced that Jesus is God, that the Bible's true?
Yeah.
Yet is from Saudi Arabia. What would your hope for that person be?
You asked me a similar question back, and I the first thing was like, how can you be non-Muslim and Saudi? Which is a very unfortunate question, because essentially by law you can't. By law, every Saudi is Muslim, and every Muslim, or not every Muslim is Saudi, but every Saudi is Muslim. And it's not really. There's a lot of non-Muslim Saudis, but it's just easier that way when you assume everybody's Muslim. So my first question would be, why the hell are you still Saudi? Or how can you keep it that way and not Saudi? That would be a point of interest to me. But the other point of interest would be like, I feel like nowadays people are turning into more science answers other than their own traditional answers. What like I would be more interested in, if you wanted to make that jump from Islam, why like do it to something? Again, like I said, the older version of the books, you know, like it's.
well, sometimes if you have things on your computer that are cluttering up, you need to go.
Definitely, you can play that metaphor, But like, I mean, again, when I came to America, I thought more people would be Christian, but not many people are practicing at all. So
no, but the thing is with that, you're right. There's the identity on one hand, but you also don't really have control over what you believe.
Yeah.
So everyone I know who's from that sort of context, it's not that it's not usually that they've thought, all right, I want to be this instead of this. It's that I believe this. What do I do with that?
Yeah. No, definitely, it's something that they're stuck with. Yeah. I'd like if my friend, for example, told me that they converted to Christianity, I'd be worried. I mean, I know that the Saudi community is not a very accepting community. I mean, I heard about some Shimmeri guy in Saudi on Twitter talking about Jesus as God, like on a tweet, and the entire country roasted him. Why? Like the big question was why? Why turn into Christianity? You know, when you can, like, it's a very dumb and very bad logic, but like they associated Christianity with just being loose and like.
Right.
Yeah. There's this association with Christians can drink and
there's several things
can have premarital sex, and it's like, why go to Christianity when you can just like leave? Now being atheist is something that you can publicly come out and say. And, like, so like, there's this huge backlash. So I would tell them not to, like, if they want to go back to Saudi, not to be public about being Christian, because that's, well, maybe it changes now with the whole reformations with the Crown Prince, but
I think it's going to take a while.
Yeah.
My general suspicion is that what it would take is for some Saudi Christian to start some really great tech company or something, and then it'd be like, okay.
Or be like a minister or something appointed by the government, like a Saudi Christian or something. But but like, again, like this is me. I'm a person that spent 5 years here in the U.S. I mean, if I tell my Saudi friend that never left Saudi that there are Saudi Christians, he would tell me that you're lying. There are no Saudi Christians. They're not Saudi. They must be like Syrian or something. They would never be Saudi, because like it's terrible. But the identity, it's an identity kind of thing.
Yeah. The first Saudi friend that I really had a conversation with, he'd always bring me to his very stereotypical sort of Riyadh kind of guy.
Yeah.
And he'd always have a bunch of Saudis at his house, and he said that, you watch, James, we're going to make you a Muslim. I said, you're not going to make me a Muslim, but you might make me an Arab.
You might make me an Arab, yeah. James of Arabia, you never know. Well, yeah. I mean, you think about it. It's what is an Arab? It's speaking Arabic. If you speak Arabic, does not make you an Arab. You never know. I mean, learn more Arabic and you can be an Arab. It's interesting how languages play these roles, changing identities. But yeah,
it's an interesting world to live in. Now, what about the average sort of American Christian? wanting to think with, you could address the average American Christian about how they think about the Middle East and how they want to see their country interact with the Middle East?
Deal with Trump first. I feel like that's the first thing I would say. I feel like Americans are very oblivious to what their government do, and I feel like that's a given of how oblivious the average American is. So I would definitely, I don't know, bring up Bush's, like some sort of thing about Bush or something. If I would send a message to an average American, to be like, American presidents do some like things that are not like, colonialism is not dead, you know. Bush wanted to take over Iraq and then go to Iran and take over all their Arab world, you know. So there's my message would be some sort of like realization to this average American that you are the colonialist machine now. Like, this is the colonialist empire. This is Rome.
There's some truth to that.
Yeah, I mean,
the fact that I remember I watched Gladiator as a kid, and then I went to actual Rome, and I was so disappointed.
Yeah.
And then I came to Washington D.C. I was like, oh, there it is.
There it is. Yeah, there's Rome. Yeah, definitely. I mean,
but I think more and more people are getting to the point where they're realizing that U.S. interventionism has been bad, in part because we've had two interventionist presidents from different sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
So if they haven't seen it on their own party, they've at least seen it on the other party. So what about what kind of relationship do you think America should move towards with the Middle East? So it's okay, we don't want to do any wars. Let's stop drone bombing weddings in Yemen. Let's take that stuff.
Oh, that's a very loaded question. A lot of things. I mean, there should be more independence to what the Middle East, like their decisions. I mean, I feel like the United Nations is no longer a good option. I feel like it's dying. It's the Arab world, like, and the reminiscence of the Ottoman Empire were not given their rights. I mean, nothing, and their share of the United Nations, which is, I mean, it's a useless process. But I mean, there is no designation of that this land once had power and had influence. I mean, it still is. So yeah, I'd focus more on, like, I don't know, talking about that, like having our dignity back, basically, being represented by ourselves and not having others present us. Yeah.
That's where I think when we talk about, people want to throw around the phrase "Make America Great Again." I think in my mind, the time when America did great things in foreign policy would be something like the Atlantic Charter.
Yeah.
I think that was a great run for like 20 years.
Yeah.
Because with the whole Suez Canal crisis, that they actually backed the Egyptians, because this is your country, then you should have sovereignty over that.
I mean, Americans brought in a whole new narrative, having sovereignty. The Europeans didn't understand that very well. Woodrow Wilson was a liberal to the Europeans. One of the most conservative presidents that we had was someone that brought bizarre ideas to the British and French, that they should have more of their own independence. And I feel like, even though Woodrow Wilson has a lot of wrongdoings and like a lot of mistakes, but we should Americans should expand on that idea. Should expand on providing the world with the American way, you know, give every person the right to be, to decide, to choose. I feel like it got corrupted to the point where if you live long enough as a hero, you see yourself become the villain. You know?
Yes.
Like I feel like American. We might be we're talking about the metaphor of Rome. We might be at the fall of the empire, the fall of the republic, and the rise of the empire. You never know.
Let's hope not.
Yeah, let's hope not. But I mean, that could happen. That could very much happen.
Right.
Yeah. We don't think about that we're making history, but things could change. I don't think that the status quo is going to remain like that for so long.
Well, I think as a Christian, the main paradigm I think of for national reform starts with Jesus saying, before you see the speck in your brother's eye, first remove the plank from your own eye. So I think almost all of us have this default setting of waking up, looking in the mirror, thinking, I'm what's right with the world.
Yeah.
What's wrong with the world is out there somewhere.
Yeah.
And so people want to, so typically people want to talk about the foreigners, the political opposition, then their family, then themselves.
Yeah.
And the Bible does not let us do that. God wants us to first examine our own character, then we deal with our own people, and then we start worrying about other people. And when you do that, it's supposed to take you to a place of humility. It's not that you deal with all your problems, then you go
somewhere else.
Then you
puts it in context. Yeah.
You put it in context, realizing, okay, well, we can look at the things that have happened in, say, Saudi Arabia or Israel, and we can think, oh, look at them, look at how backwards that is. But if we may not have the exact same problems, but we have equally weighty problems in other ways, and that's true on an individual level as well.
Yeah.
That it's very easy to be all about other people's business
and not care about your own business. Yeah.
And I think that's why you're dead on the money with the need for individualism, but not individualism in the sense it's become in America. Individualism is this selfish individualism.
Yeah.
Biblically, individualism is about doing the right thing, even if you're the only one that does it, for the glory of God and the good of others around you. And you're not waiting for the crowd in order to do what's right.
That's right, yeah.
Because you'll be waiting forever.
Yeah. I mean, same thing with Islam, where it's like the minority and like saying what's right and doing what's right. And yeah, these are religions of the underdogs. Like these roots for they always root for the underdogs, the meek. I can see an application of these religious ideas into the modern world, but I don't see like the matter of talking about them as relevant as it is or it was before. So like it's interesting to talk about these things, but we should focus more about psychology. We should focus more about the more contemporary philosophy of humans too, like, because again, Christianity and Islam and Judaism offer us these beliefs and these very old cultures, basically. But again, they also give us a huge, especially in Islam, the amount of vagueness that it opens up for a huge point of interpretation to play its role. And humans are terrible.
Yeah.
They will always find a way to corrupt things.
I think the focus on human nature is a really important part. I actually know a Christian Bahraini psychologist.
Interesting.
But I really don't think it's either or, because your view of what a person is comes from your worldview.
Definitely.
And I think that whether we have one that's primarily religiously informed, a discussion of human nature is really important, because some people believe there's no such thing as human nature, and that a person can kind of be reprogrammed into whatever you want a person to be.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really dangerous idea. And that's not an inherently religious idea, but that's still informed by a certain worldview.
Yeah.
And I think if we believe that about people, we're going to end up with a lot of people dead if we try and enact policies on that.
Changing human nature, yeah.
So I think what is human nature is a really important conversation where our religious views need to be openly discussed. Now, the part where religion all breaks down is when we start arguing about who should be in charge of everybody.
Yes, that's always an important question. Yeah.
Yes, but even my view on that in formal religious theory, somebody should not be in charge of everybody.
Yeah.
So I cannot separate who I am from my religious ideas, and they impact my politics, my psychology, my everything. So what I want here is not that so people will come and represent the perfect vision of Islam or Christianity, but that they'd honestly talk about ideas from whatever perspective they're from. And I think that's an innately healthy conversation for any society, and it's one that I think I notice people from the Middle East having more than people living in Seattle. And I think that when you focus on these things and you think about these things and you become aware of what's driving you, then that's good. And if you just passively accept everything happening in the background, that's a culture in decline. And I think American culture is a bit right now.
It is very much, yeah.
Because we don't openly talk about that.
We don't talk about it. We don't talk about McDonald's being there and Coca-Cola changing our entire culture. But yeah, it's becoming the new religion. It's interesting how we humans are so fragile to even the ideas, like to even a simple thing as an idea could change a lot of things in our everyday lives. A simple phrase could make your day, make your week. So I don't think we'll ever reach a point of settlement in this discussion of human nature, because until we maybe cease to exist as Homo sapiens as we know. But it will forever be a discussion of how our human nature still is applicable to our daily lives.
And I think the reason it's important to talk about it is because I think the average Seattleite doesn't realize they have a worldview. They think, I don't have a worldview. I'm just a normal,
global citizen. Yeah,
I'm just a normal, empathetic human being. Whereas they do have a worldview, and they're not aware of that. And if you're aware of your worldview, you can actually have more tolerance for other people's worldviews.
Definitely.
Because you realize that there's lots of things that go into you that do not go into everyone else.
And once you can relate how other people can see you differently, you can also relate on how the differences you can see in other people and understand and empathize with that. Yeah, definitely. I see your point of that and the comparison between the Middle East and Americans and maybe the coasters especially.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. These big cities give these feeling that they take away the feeling of a worldview or culture or something. They just citizens of the globe, citizens of the world. But yeah.
Well, I think we have a lot of opportunities in front of us and a lot of ways to fall off the side of the road as well. And I think we've just got to keep being intentional. So yeah. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
Thank you guys for listening to the Al-Maida Initiative podcast. We'll be back next week with another episode.